One of the most important characters in all-around Vampire the Masquerade lore is Caine, the Dark Father, the Dark Prince, the first vampire, a lot of nicknames that kind of go down that similar track record. But for how important he is, we also genuinely don't know a lot about him. While there might be books that directly answer that question and plenty of lore videos, a lot of them are mainly sourced from like one thing, the Book of Nod. Which, well, yeah, true, it's a pretty big deal being the vampire Bible, essentially, and laying out the large vampire creation myth. It also is just one source. There are many different interpretations of Caine and his story, and for a guy this important, covering all those bases I think is merited. This is the thing I like most about Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness. I really like the conflicting nature of information in this world, where a character that long ago, with basically no primary sources left on his existence, leaves him to be this mythological figure that I think really plays into all of these characters in this fun setting. But real quick, before I get into the specific interpretations of him, because there are a couple, I'm gonna cover my bases and quickly give you an overview of Caine's story in the World of Darkness and how vampires came to be. Mainly, this original part's gonna be from the Book of Nod, like I said, that's the main vampire creation myth, so that's where a lot of the information comes from, but when I'm going over the interpretations, I'll circle back and all that. So the world happens in accordance with Genesis from the Bible. Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and then later they have Cain and Abel, their sons. Now, when Abel and Cain are given their sacrifices to God, God likes Abel's a lot better, because it's a goat and it's meat and not like fruit and veggies and shit. God, being on that all meat diet, said no, he doesn't want it, so Cain, for whatever reason, murders his brother. God curses him to eternally walk the earth as a fugitive to the land, to where on his wandering he found Lilith, who is the first woman. Eve wasn't the first woman, it was Lilith. She was Adam's first wife. She took pity on him, took him in. They also had a thing a little later, but Lilith taught Cain all these cool magical rituals and dark secrets. And then Cain drank her blood, to where under this ritual, he was then approached by 3 angels who offered him forgiveness, and he, for whatever reason, said nah, he doesn't want to deal with it. They cursed him, making him into the current vampire, like all around. You know, weak to sunlight, needs to drink blood, all that stuff. And then it's from this that his blood is passed down through generations up to modern nights where we have like 16th generation vampires. Each time the blood of Cain getting more and more diluted as the generations go on. So then, after this, he goes and founds the first city of Enoch, where he rules as its dark king, creating a vampire society. He goes on, makes the 2nd generation of vampires, who then they go on to make the 3rd generation of vampires, the antediluvians, as in before the flood, because that's a big thing with this story. So Cain created a thriving city. So thriving, other neighboring cities were constantly attacking it because of all the resources they had. So eventually, God wasn't a big fan of this. As it's been interpreted by some of the characters, including Cain himself, God didn't like this very clear spit in the face of his judgment, because he cursed these people to be monsters, and now here they are living in a proper society. So the deluge happened, or the Great Flood as we know it. The whole thing with Noah's Ark in the Bible, nah, that wasn't a like planet mulligan. It was actually to kill the vampires. To where Cain was alive because he straight up fucking left before the deluge happened, and all the vampires had to deal with the flooding. To where once the waters like washed away and dried up, he was gone. He put himself into self-exile, just disappeared. Other vampires would go try to find him, but no dice. The lucky few that would find him, he turned away. He eventually did come back. For the final time, the final appearance of Cain was he returned after the antediluvians in the 2nd city that they founded killed all of the 2nd generation vampires, his childer. He was fucking pissed about this and cursed them all. Gave them complete curses to pass down their bloodline, which are your clan banes when you're playing in the game, except for a few who weren't around to get cursed by Cain. Like the Banu Hakim and the Tremere, they were not Cain cursed. And that's a thing that's also really important to nail about Cain. This dude is fucking terrifying because he has the power to curse your entire bloodline. I think that should be stated very well. Now, to put this into context for you tabletop players who might not know much about the actual rules and stuff for Vampire, there gets to a point with Vampire Generations where it becomes impossible to snap them. The strongest vampire, as in like the youngest generation there's a stat block for, is, from my research, please bear with me, correct me if I'm wrong, is this guy with a name I don't want to pronounce because I'm very bad at pronouncing any other language than English, even then it's a struggle. This guy's like 4th generation, and oh my god. Because past 4th generation, their stat block essentially is just the word yes. Now, picture that with the antediluvian, the step above this guy, and then amplify that by however fucking many points as Caine. It's like double yes, or triple yes. He's terrifying. He's immense power to the point where he could probably be seen as a god himself. Which, speaking of god, this brings us into the interpretations of Caine. Now, his story obviously happened such a long time ago. All there really is these interpretations from other sources. So a lot of kindred have their different ideas of who he is. In fact, there's a different interpretation set based on if you're talking about the Dark Ages and medieval era of vampires, or modern knights, like our current day. In the Dark Ages, Caine was viewed as a godhead, a singularity with like 3 things. I used to be religious and even I don't fully understand the concept of the godhead in Christianity, I'll be completely real, but it works like that for those who do. To where in modern knights, there's a different interpretation of Caine, which sees him as one of 3 different, I guess, general personalities and character types. These being the Dark King, the Fisher King, or the Great King of Blood and Darkness. So first up, the Dark King. This is what we see in the Book of Nod, and largely in Nodist religions, and is the main ideology of the Sabbat. The Dark King shows Caine as a god figure, a wrathful, evil figure that imposes judgment on all of his subjects. A Dark King who will come back in Gehenna, the end of days, the vampire apocalypse, bringing all the Sabbat, the sword of Caine, to wield as he takes everything over and creates a new rule of vampire supremacy. Of course, there's a little bit more reasonable concepts with this. You can be a Nodist scholar and think about Nodism without going full Sabbat terrorism, but that's primarily the main method with this. And then the Fisher King, which sees Caine as a more remorseful figure. This reframing of the Book of Nod comes from the Ereses fragments. I hope I'm saying that right. This book, by the way, this shit rules. I read this whole thing. It's fucking awesome. Find a copy, find a PDF, find something, just read it. So this is a reframing of the Book of Nod, as in, it's mainly theorized to be written by Caine himself, like the original copy that the Book of Nod, which is also apparently written by Caine, was based off of, as like a derivative. So this one sees Caine as a very sympathetic figure. In this version, he gives God an offering of his best of the crops, the absolute finest, and God turns him down, and instead is super down for this goat blood that Abel just produced. When trying to figure out what he's doing wrong, he was then told that, God cursed Adam to till the earth and not reap the bounties of the garden after his transgression, so why would he want to receive that? Caine's like, that's a fair point. And so, seeing all this, honestly, pretty understandably assumed, God just wants blood. That's what he cares about. So he kills Abel as a sacrifice, as a gift to God, and then is declared the first murderer and is chastised and sent out for it. He's not super happy about this, and then when he does encounter the angels, he essentially has built his lot in life. He's taking his punishment. It is in that situation of, I'm the way God made me. God made me this way, and he designed me like this, so I can't really accept this. To where then he was cursed. And now, in modern nights, it is said, with the Fisher King interpretation, that he forever wanders the earth, trying to find a method to escape his vampiric curse. Wherever he is now, never slumbering, just around us, wherever he could be. This omnipotent, powerful creature, just kind of vibing in our general area. And then lastly, the Great King of Blood and Darkness. This is an interesting pick because this comes from a source book from Demon the Fallen, and this is from a book known as The Days of Fire, or the Dies Ferae. I'm also shit with Latin, so this is a book. Now it's really interesting that I have to say this sentence, where we're going to have to take the word of Satan himself because it's apparently written by him. So this is the origin story of demons in the world. The falling angels, like all of that, the war in heaven, the whole thing is here. And from their perspective, Cain, when he gives the offering of Abel, God rejects, like the gift, says no. Then the fallen angels are like, yo, they're not claiming that. I got dibs. So then they take the gift and ascend in power to declare themselves gods and demons. So Cain is the creator of demons, as like we know them in the world of darkness. And then Lucifer then later says that Cain takes on the mantle of the great king of blood and darkness and rules. With this art, paints a picture. And this is very sick. This is another cool book. But this one is a little less more on like the god side and more of a vampiric tyrant ruling in an age of blood. Very Dracula, Vlad the Impaler style. Don't tell him I said that. Most vampires in the world of darkness would take that as a giant insult. But all this leads to the question, which interpretation is the truth? Like, we have these three very different in some aspects. Either Cain is a force of evil in like tyranny, or is a genuinely like kind of depressed guy, cursed with immortality, who has to walk the earth, and living that long in your own head, that's fucking rough. So I guess which one is canon? Well, that's the thing with World of Darkness, and I think that people need to keep this in their mind. Because the World of Darkness is a tabletop game, and like it's a role-playing game, it is going to be based on your chronicle, whatever you're running, whatever game you're in. Because World of Darkness, the true one, is whatever you make. Like what your version of the World of Darkness is. Like for example, for me, the thing I get out of this and the chronicle vibes I'm making is I'm a big fan of the slow decline and the slow apocalypse. Things that are just dwindling slowly and slowly and slowly, but never ending, until it gets to a point where everything just stops. Everything dies out, it's gone. The vampires who are being driven more and more and more into the dark as humans build more and more ways in the modern nights to breach the masquerade they've spent so much time crafting. Werewolves who are slowly losing the fight against the worm as the earth gets more and more polluted and corrupted. Mages who are losing the fight against the technocracy and building a consensus of logic and reason, kind of pushing them more to the wayside for their own magic and their like practices. That's my World of Darkness. So because of that, I lean a lot more into the Fisher King interpretation. I like the idea of Cain as this very powerful figure, cursed with living forever, cursed with being the most powerful person on earth, cursed with just being alone in his own head like that. There's nobody that Cain can relate to. There's no one he can be true friends with because he's on a whole different level of being. That's my version of him. And there is one more thing I have to say, because this is my channel. And there's one thing that holds true on this YouTube account is that I don't just deliver opinions. All my opinions are fucking facts. You wanna know why? Because in Bloodlines, Cain is the cab driver in that game, which means he's still around, and you know what he's not doing in a cab? Being a dark tyrant and a god. He's just hanging out, making this kindred in LA do make the right choices. Or making, if you play as a Malkavian, make Malkav, the antediluvian, live in your head, scream incoherently of how terrified he is. So I'm fucking right. Booyah.